Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey, Dream Drivers. Welcome to episode 45 of the Dreams in Drive No Parking Podcast. Today, our guest is Amber Aziza, who is the founder and CEO of A2Coach.com and MidnightMillionaireClub.com. Before turning 30, Amber built and sold her first multi-million-dollar business. She now helps her clients learn the process of business ownership and how to move from ideation to their first $1 million year. On today's episode, we talk the fundamentals of building a seven-figure business. Amber shares her personal rise to success and why she decided to quit a successful job and launch her own business. We talk about the common mistakes many new entrepreneurs make, the greatest lessons she's learned working in corporate America, 3 keys to building a multi-million dollar business, the 5 channels of a successful business, and some of the current challenges she's facing in the coaching space today. Before we get into the episode, I just want to send a reminder that if you are listening in on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other platform, make sure that you subscribe. By subscribing, you'll be sure to hear the newest releases first. If you're also feeling up to it, make sure to leave a review and let me know what you think of today's episode. It's always a pleasure listening to listeners' feedback on the show, so I would really appreciate that. For today's show notes, visit dreamsindrive.com and click on episode 45 to join our Dreams in Drive community for weekly access to exclusive content in our weekly No Parking newsletter. You can visit www.dreamsindrive.com/join. Last but not least, don't forget to follow us on social at Dreams in Drive across the board. That's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're there. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. This one was really special, and Amber shares some great tips. Hi, Amber. Thank you so much for being a guest on today's episode of Dreams in Drive. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I know, as I was saying earlier before we started recording, I've been a fan of yours for a while, and I actually came across your work about a year or so ago. And when your publicist reached out to me to schedule an interview, it was just like, wow, the universe is conspiring to make this happen. So thank you once again.
No problem. Thank you for having me here.
So on Dreams in Drive, the way I like to start all our interviews is kind of, going back in time. So Amber, tell me what inspired you as a child. If you had to say who Amber the 8-year-old was, what would that look like?
Oh gosh, Amber the 8-year-old. She was a hustler, much like Amber the 31-year-old.
Wow, really? What were you hustling at 8 years old?
So I always known that I wanted to be successful. I didn't know what success looked like, but I knew that I wanted success. And people would say, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I would tell them, I don't know, but I'm going to sit behind a desk and make lots of money. And that's just how I've always approached things. I was the type that would go to Sam's Club with my dad, and we would buy the king size, 48 pack of Snickers bars, and I'd take them to school the next day, and we might have bought the whole box for maybe $10, and I would sell them for $1 each. I was that kid. I just always wanted more, and I always looked up to those who were accomplishing things and making great things happen. And so for me, at 8, I was that person. I was that kid that I had big dreams. I didn't know how I was going to get there. And admittedly, I think for the next decade after that, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to get there. But I knew that it's something I wanted.
So who were some of your early inspirations? You said you were looking up to people. Do you remember who you looked up to at that age or around that age?
Yeah, I actually do. So I had a friend whose mom was an international banker. And so she spent a lot of time, flying back and forth. And I remember I was staying the night over my friend's house, and her mom was in her office, and I heard her on a business call, and I just thought, oh, she sounds so official. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And so for a very long time, I told people I was going to be an international banker. I had no idea what an international banker did. I just knew that she sounded really important. But, you know, I looked up to the classics for us as kids. I looked, you know, up to Oprah, and I thought that she was amazing and all the things that she had her hand in. And then when she started her magazine, it was like, what? She has a magazine? She's crazy. And years later, the magazine is still thriving. And so for me, there weren't as many examples of brown-skinned girls doing big things when I was growing up. You just didn't see it. We didn't have social media, so we couldn't see the people who were doing it on a smaller scale. And people who were doing it on a bigger scale, the media wasn't really portraying that. And so I remember distinctly having a conversation with my father when I was about 12 years old saying, I'm going to be that girl. I'm going to be that woman that other little girls can look up to. And he said, okay, that sounds good.
I was going to ask you, so what did he say? I think it's so interesting that you mention all this stuff, because over the course of this year, talking to all our different guests on the show, it's always so interesting to hear what a lot of our guests were doing as children and what they were thinking. And one theme that I had that I see a lot of is we were creators, hustlers, and a lot of people had imaginary friends. So I'm just going to ask you, did you have any imaginary friends when you were younger?
I didn't have any imaginary friends. I never went through the imaginary friend stage. I think part of the reason that I didn't, though, is because I started out young with a very kind of hard life. Like by 5 years old, I'd seen things that most adults hadn't seen. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I didn't have imaginary friends. I was very like solo on your own. Like if you can't make it on your own, then you're not going to make it. You know, I was the type that when my parents pulled me from foster care to adopt me, I actually would sleep on the floor because I didn't want to get comfortable on the bed in case they decided to send me back to foster care. So for me, you know, I didn't have imaginary friends, but I had friends who did, and I was like, "What do you mean he's sitting right here?" Like it was the most crazy thing to my tiny mind to understand. Like, so like he's a ghost, or like I didn't get it, but I did have Colleen Irene, who was my very first Cabbage Patch doll. And she was like my best friend. We went everywhere together. We did everything together. We changed clothes together. We were like, she was my American Girl doll before American Girl dolls were a thing. So, so I think, you know, if you would ask my parents, they would probably say Colleen Irene because, you know, she needed a seat at the table, and we would go to a restaurant and, you know, they'd say how many. And if they didn't count Colleen Irene, I would be very upset. So.
So how did you take that hustler mentality with you throughout your young adult life and into let's say your early 20s? Maybe walk us through that part of your life.
Yeah, so I graduated high school a year early. I found a loophole and I said, I'm out. And when I got into college, my goal was finish as fast as possible with as little debt as possible. Neither of those happened. I finished in the normal amount of time with about the normal amount of student loan debt. And but during my college experience, for me, it was very important that I could graduate and go into corporate America and get the best job available. I didn't want the entry level job. I've always been, you know, my dad always jokes that I've always been bougie. I've always been the one that's like, oh no, I'm not taking the entry level job. I'm too good for that. And so I said, you know, I don't want that job. And I was talking to a mentor when I was 21, and she said, if you don't want that job, you're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to make sure that, you know, you have the best internships you can find. And so I did. I had so many internships in college. And I was that girl that would work 4 jobs, but didn't need to work 4 jobs. I was like, why do you have 4 jobs? Because I want the experience. Like, it was like I was addicted to working and making money. But for me, I think really when the hustler side really came out was I had the ability to get my first kind of big girl job with the United Health Group, and it was in Nashville, and I was going to school at the University of Toledo at the time. And I had a little bit of schooling left. I had like 2 semesters left, and they were willing to hire me without it. And you talk about a fork in the road. That was my fork in the road. Do I stay to finish my degree, or do I leave and peace out and go and end up, finishing my degree, because this was before online college was a huge thing. So do I go and finish my degree, but knowing that I'm going to have to add another 2 semesters to it, because most universities at the time, you had to have at least 2 years with them. And so I said, you know what, forget it, I'm going to go. So I went and I finished my degree, but I took my first job. So I was working a full-time job, going to school full-time. I was engaged at the time, and it was a lot. It was a lot more than I would probably encourage my nieces now to take on. Mm-hmm. But for me, if I'm not feeling the pressure from something, it's hard for me to succeed, if that makes any sense. If there's no pressure coming from anywhere, I'm the constant, procrastinator and slacker. And I tell people that all the time, and they laugh. They're like, no way, you're not a slacker. There's no way. Yes, there is. Mm-hmm. I have to feel pressure. I have to feel the heat from something to make me get stuff done. And so when I was in my early 20s, that's what I felt, was the heat of, I've got real bills now. I have to pay rent. Like, what? I'm not getting a student refund check. Like, what? So for me, I took that hustle and went into corporate America and just quickly escalated my position. I accelerated my career very quickly. I went from being, a junior trainer to being a director of training, where I was running my own department within 2 years.
Wow. And how old were you by this time?
By that time, I was 23.
Oh my gosh. 23, I was still lost. Okay.
Yeah. So by 23, I had my own department. I had been headhunted to build my own department for a financial company. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I even told them in the interview, look, I've never run a department before, but I'm pretty sure I could, because I'm pretty good at everything.
Did you actually say that to them?
I actually said that to them. And thank God they were the type of entrepreneurs who, they were very entrepreneurial. It was a husband and wife, and they owned their company. They had 500 employees, and, they were the type that they appreciated that. As an entrepreneur, you can appreciate that. As a manager, you're like, I don't want that cocky kid in my business. No, she can't be here. But as someone who, is an entrepreneur, you can see that drive and that hustle, and you're like, yeah, she knows her stuff, and she can admit that she knows her stuff. So I don't have to worry about if she knows it. And so they hired me, and it was my first 6-figure a year check. It was my first time getting a bonus. Which was really like, whoa, a bonus. Like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. But that year I had to prove myself. I had to build a business. And at the time I had broken off my engagement. I was living on my own for the very first time in my entire life. And it was kind of the prove yourself phase. And so from age 23 to 25, I was really in prove myself grind mode, where I was building this training department pretty autonomously, because it was like, here you go, here's a budget, hire employees, and figure it out. And so I did. And that really set the stage for me in my entrepreneurship life, because I learned very quickly and rapidly, the ins and outs, because my bosses were the 2 entrepreneurs, and they were very honest and transparent with me about, this is what your budget is, or no, you can't do that, or, figure it out, try it. And if things went wrong, I got blasted for it. There was no kitten gloves with me. It was very, straightforward. But I feel that is what made me the successful entrepreneur I am today, is working right under 2 entrepreneurs who really said, we're trusting that you know what you're doing. And fortunately, I did know what I was doing. So never say that you know what you're doing if you don't. But
or if you aren't committed to figuring out what you have to do.
I'm committed to finding the answer. And I did, and I ended up with a 3-time award-winning training department that became an industry standard in terms of training videos and training millennials. So for me, that wasn't the goal. For me, it was just, gosh, don't get fired. But for me, the ability to build something great and see the results and see the direct impact it has on the business was beneficial because I was ready. I knew that building a business on my own was possible.
So quick question. Do you know your personality type?
You know what? I did. And it was, gosh, I took the test like a couple of years ago and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was.
Okay, the only reason why I'm asking is because my sister gave me this book the other day, which is called Do What You Are, and it's by Paul Teager and Barbara Barron. And they just have listed the different personality types, and I have it right in front of me. So I just wanted to see if you remembered yours. So I was going to tell you what they said your personality type is, like the type of business you would have. Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember. I want to say it's like IJTP or something like that, but I can't remember for the life of me.
Okay, well, if you do remember throughout the course of this interview. So let me ask you this. What do you think was the biggest lesson or the biggest business lesson that you learned working for that company for those 2 years?
I think the biggest business lesson that I learned was that in terms of building a business, it's not linear. It's not in a bubble. It's not in a vacuum. So many things impact your success and your demise. In the time I was with them, I ended up being with them total for three and a half years.
Okay.
In that time frame, I saw the business do really, really well and then take a dip and then do really, really well again. I worked with lobbyists because we were a financial company, and so we had to have certain laws that we needed in place to stay in place in order to succeed. I also saw the ability to work around the clock for something that you love. It was easy for me as the training director to sit at my desk in my office at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night because I'd look across the hall and the owners were at their desks in their office at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And so I learned, I think, business-wise, that it's not in a bubble. And just because you think everything's going to go great, you can do everything exactly how you're supposed to, and things can still go wrong. Outside factors can still impact your business. But it's really your resolve, it's really your determination, and it's really your hard work that determines if you are able to survive the outside impacts that really affect your business.
So let's talk about the Aziza Group, which was your consulting firm that eventually got acquired. What inspired you to launch that, and how did you end up selling it? Because I feel like that's a big goal for a lot of people, and you were able to accomplish that pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I was motivated to start the Aziza Group when I was essentially headhunted by a competitor of the company that I had started with as training director. And so I went to them thinking this was going to be amazing. They were an international company. They had thousands upon thousands of employees. And I thought this is going to be great. And it was a nightmare. It was the most disorganized thing ever. The owner was so many layers up and worked like maybe 2 or 3 days out of the month.
The month? What?
Yes.
Where they do that at?
Right. So it was just it was very, when people complain about corporate, that was the first time I'd ever felt like, oh, this is what they mean. Like, ugh, that's not fun at all. And so I think that for me, I said, you know what? Okay, Amber, stick it out. You're getting paid really, really well. At that point, I was making, the high end of $100,000. So it was like $160,000, $170,000 a year.
You're like 26 at this time?
At that time, I was 26. Okay. Yeah, 26, no children, not married, very disposable income. And so I said, okay, stick with it. Maybe it'll get better. And it didn't. But I was able to make improvements from my position of director of knowledge and learning, which was over the organizational development department. And I was able to make really great changes that really impacted the business, which was amazing. However, when we all sat down for our executive meeting, owner comes in, he's like, I want to really give a great big hand to Amber. She's made a lot of changes. We fought those changes, but she made them happen. And now look at us now. We have this really, successful business that's thriving, and our retention rate for our employees is up and people are happier. And we made way more money last year than we ever did. So that's thanks to Amber. So everyone's like, yeah, good job. And he says, and we hit our goal financially. So all the executives are going to get our bonuses. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because at that time, my bonus was going to be like the upwards part of $30,000, $40,000. Mm-hmm. So I was like, yes, this is amazing. I'm going to give me a Tesla. I already planned it out. I knew what color I was getting. Like, it was a done deal. And so we're packing up from the meeting, and he comes over to me and says, you really did a great job. I said, well, thank you so much. And he says, so what are you going to get with your bonus check? And I said, I think I'm going to get a car. I'm really excited. Like, I'm just going to go in and just, boom, here's the cash. Like, let's do it. And he said, oh, that's amazing. I remember when I bought my first car, and I'm like, oh, okay, great. So I'm thinking, oh, this is a good pep talk. So I jokingly say to him, what are you going to get with your bonus? And he says, oh, I'm going to buy an island. And I just stood there with my jaw probably on the floor. And I was like, did you just say you're buying an island?
Wait, was he serious?
He was very serious. Not only was he buying an island, he had already bought said island, and he was going to buy a yacht so that they could get from the mainland to the said island.
With his bonus. Just his bonus.
Yes, with his cut of the bonus. And what hit me in that moment was something so profound that I really wish every single working girl out there could have this epiphany moment. And it was, I work 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, and I'm getting a car. He works 3 or 4 days a month. And when he does work, he's here maybe 2 hours, and he's getting an island. And I said, I just bought him an island. My hard work, my efforts. He said if it weren't for me and my department and the changes that I made, they would not have had a positive year. They wouldn't have had a year that was in the black. They would have had a year that was in the red. So now you're telling me I just bought you an island with my heart, blood, sweat, and tears, and I'm getting a car out of it. And that moment I quit.
You quit right there?
I quit. I'm done right there, right then.
Did you get your bonus, girl?
Girl, no. And I really wish I could go back in time and tell.
Oh, Jesus.
Stay until the end of the year. Get your bonus. But I quit. And I've always been a spontaneous person. I don't think a single soul that knew me was shocked that I had quit. They were just kind of like, oh, that's Amber. I was so afraid, though, to tell my parents that I actually told them I was laid off. Because I didn't want them to
be mad at me. Just in case
they
do.
Okay, they do know the truth now that I did quit my job. But I didn't want them to be mad at me. Because my parents are, union workers from the Midwest, and the thought is you don't leave a perfectly good job, especially a job that's paying you 6 figures a year. What are you doing? You're crazy. And so I quit my job, and everyone said, what are you going to do? And I said, not work for somebody else. I was like, because that's for the birds. I'm not doing that again. That doesn't make any sense. Like, he bought an island. I got a car.
You were just trying to get a Tesla.
Right, exactly. And so that was the catalyst to me starting the Aziza Group. I knew that I was good at being able to really be the bridge between millennials and executives. That was kind of the thing that I was known for. Executives would drag their interns to my office and be like, he won't listen to me. What should I do? And so I had a knack for that. And I knew that I had a really large network. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to have to leverage my network and leverage what I know and make it happen. So the Aziza Group started off as a resume writing company because I just needed money. And so I started out helping people write their resumes, and then helping them find jobs, and then doing corporate consults, which was really where the big money is corporate consults. And I just had this ability to really leverage who I knew. And like, once I got one gig, I was able to get another one and another one and another one because I would just leverage their networks. Mm-hmm. And was able to build this multi-million-dollar organization with a very lean staff. And I was happy. I loved what I did. But I started to feel burned out because it started to feel like work again because I was working, 15, 17 hours a day. And, 8 of them would be at one of our corporate clients' offices. And it would just feel like I was back at work. I was back, under the chains again. Mm-hmm. And so I prayed on it. And I said, God, I don't know why I feel this way. I have this successful business that many people would just, give their right arm for. I don't want this anymore, but I don't want to stop and not do anything. And so I said, just show me the way. Is this what you mean? Is this what you want for me? And about a week or so later, I got a call from my lawyer saying someone has emailed me asking if you would be interested in selling. And I said no, because my name's on it, so I'm not selling it. No. And so after some back and forth, the third offer they gave, I said, okay, for that, I'll give you my first name if you want it.
And my middle name too, my middle initial.
Right. You want me to name my firstborn after you? I'll do that too. And so I sold my company. And for me, it was bittersweet because there were things in the sale that I guess I had never sold a business before. So there were things in the sale that I just didn't even think of. So like the fact that it was a private sale, meaning that I am not allowed to disclose based upon, my non-disclosure agreement. I'm not allowed to disclose, who bought the business because they folded it into theirs. They really wanted our client book and they really wanted a software that my team and I had created. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't allowed to tell people who bought us. So it was like, okay. And it really was a piece of me. It was like a baby. It was like giving your baby away to someone else. And they asked if I would stay on for a year to help with the transition. And I said, no, I didn't want to. I didn't want to do it. And so I kind of lounged about. And when I actually sold the business, signed the papers, I went home that night and laid on my living room floor and cried because it was just so much emotionally that had been taken out of me.
Positive or negative?
A little bit of both. It was a long process, first of all. When people say, oh, yeah, you sell your business is awesome. Yes, it is awesome. But it takes a while for that to actually happen because your business gets evaluated. You think your business is worth a ton. And then the independent evaluator comes in and they're like, yeah, I mean, it's worth some money. It was still 7 figures, but it was not where I thought it was. And then there's the negotiation part because, of course, they're going to try to get the best deal. And so it can be very draining. And then also it was like, who am I if I'm not an entrepreneur? Who am I if I don't have a business? What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just retire? Like, who retires at 28? Like, no one does that. And so for me, it was really emotional. And so I just kind of owned it and accepted that emotion for a while. And then got off the floor. And was basically like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it, God works in mysterious ways. I'm a preacher's kid. And mm-hmm. God and I have such a love affair. And so when I said, okay, well, I sold the business. Now what? A friend of mine called who lived in Miami, who owned a couple of businesses, and said, hey, I'm going to fly you here. You'll get some sun, and I need you to help me with my business. And I did. And he was like, you need to do this like for a living. This needs to be what you do. And that's how A Squared Coach was born, because of a friend who told me I needed to do it for a living.
So what kind of clients do you work with now?
So now I work with, oh my goodness, a mixed bag of clients. So I have clients who are operating at high 6 figures, low 7-figure range, in an effort to pull them into mid to high 7-figure or 8-figure range. I also work with clients who are just starting out in their businesses. And this is a new kind of venture for me because I found that so many times once they got to the point of saying, oh, I've been in business a year or two, they had gotten so much misinformation that there was nothing I could do to help them. It was just like, scrap it and start over. And so I decided, you know what, let's just create something specifically for those who are new to entrepreneurship. So I help them as well. I also I help venture capitalists as well. I have two venture capitalists two venture capitalist firms and one angel investor that are clients of mine. And essentially what I do for them is businesses that they invest $1.5 million in or more. If they are millennial run businesses, I come in and mentor them and coach them to make sure that the business will be sustainable. So I have a gamut of clients that I work with, and I still do some corporate consulting for millennials on the consumer end.
So what do you think is a big problem that you see with millennial newbie entrepreneurs? Because a lot of our dream drivers listening in are just starting their businesses or have been in business maybe 1 year or 2 years. What's a big mistake you see?
I think the biggest mistake that I see is thinking that it's going to happen a lot faster than it's supposed to. Thinking that, the one person that you see that, well, she quit her job and then she made 7 figures in like 3 months. That person was grinding for 3 years before that even happened. You saw the result. You did not see the hustle that went behind it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's wanting the easy way. And I'm a millennial, so I can say that. We like the easy way out if we can. I think also is millennials as a whole, we aren't as great of listeners as we think we are. We are the worst generation in listening, actually. Zillennials actually beat us out in a study done by Pew Research in our listening abilities. Yes, 14-year-olds listen better than we. Yes.
Why? Why are we so messed up? Why?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are so consumed with our technology and what we're doing and proving ourselves. We are the prove ourselves generation. Mm-hmm. People say all these negative stereotypes about us, and I don't believe any of them, but we constantly fight to prove ourselves. And I think as entrepreneurs, it's overtly so. And I think that a big mistake we make as millennials is sometimes we don't want to listen to other people. We think, oh, well, that's the old way of doing it. I'll find the new way of doing it. And that's fine, because I'm the type of person that if everybody else is going left, I'm going right. When everyone else was doing free webinars, I was charging for mine and still making money. So I get it. But there comes a time when you got to listen to somebody. you gotta listen to someone, because a lot of times the advice that they're giving you is not just this is what I think you should do, but it's experience. And that's something that you can't create. I used to tell people in the corporate world all the time, nothing will replace experience. And you got to do what you got to do to create experience in your business. And so you have to be able to be willing to listen to the people who've already gone through the trenches, who've already done the hard work, who've already, fallen on their butts and had to get back up. You got to listen to them. You don't have to necessarily take in every word they say and build your business based upon what they tell you, but listen to them and learn from them, learn the lessons from them, because they're so valuable.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. And I think something else is I think we listen, but sometimes we listen to the wrong people, right? I think sometimes we listen to I don't want to generalize here, but I think sometimes millennials put the wrong people on the pedestal. You know what I mean? Like, social media stars or celebrities, mm-hmm. but we don't really understand that those aren't the people who we should probably be listening to if we want to grow our business. Kanye saying, F everybody, do your own thing, doesn't always translate to dollars if you're trying to build your business. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So I definitely agree. Listening to the wrong people will get you in trouble. And you know what? I think also, kind of to piggyback on that, just because you're popular doesn't mean you're successful. Oh, and I think sometimes people focus too much on how many Twitter followers do I have, or how many Facebook followers do I have, how many people know my name, how many people see my face at this conference or that conference, or I did this and I did that. But those same people who are doing that are the same people who are on my Skype crying that they didn't make 5 figures last month. So I would say don't focus on popularity. Focus on just succeeding in your own right. Something that I tell people often is think about it this way. So Tony Robbins, the amazing guru, he's just fantastic. The
I
man
love
is, he's
him.
amazing, right?
Have you read the new Ink magazine with him on the cover?
I have not. It's sitting on my coffee table and I'm like ready to curl up with it and read it. I just watched I'm Not Your Guru and I just cried the entire time.
Oh no, I'm scared. It's next on my list.
Yeah. So he's amazing. He is wonderful. And he's possibly one of the most brilliant minds that there are in business. And if you think about people like Ratmeet Sethi of I Will Teach You How to Be Rich, he is amazing as well. But these guys, even though you think these guys are amazing and they are the creme de la creme, what you don't realize is that they have a coach. But you don't know that coach's name because he doesn't care about being popular. He charges $150,000 a year. He could give a rat's booty about being popular. He isn't for the masses. He's for the elite. And so, the way that I tell people is, would you rather be the Tony Robbins or would you rather be Tony Robbins' advisor? I'd rather be Tony Robbins' advisor because that guy is bringing in way more than Tony Robbins, as well as he has way more influence, right? So I think people sometimes focus so much on, I want to be popular. I want to be popular. Don't focus on popularity. Popularity doesn't pay your bills. Verizon is not going to accept that you have 100,000 Facebook followers as a form of payment for next month's bill. They're not. They're going to be like, that's great. Where's the money? So I think sometimes people just focus so much on the wrong thing. And like you said, they're listening to the wrong people who are telling them that popularity is what's important. Having a bunch of followers is what's important. And that's great and that's wonderful. But if you aren't able to turn those followers into purchasers, then they really aren't as excited about you as you think they are.
Oh my gosh. I wish we could. I think in the podcast edit, I'm just going to replay this section twice so that people can understand how important that is. And I think sometimes that can often deter people from continuing a dream that they have or continuing with a venture that they have because they're not seeing the quote unquote popularity, right? Early on, they're using that as a metric for success versus how much sales are you bringing in? How many new customers or prospects or how are you loading your funnel? Stuff like that you should be thinking about. But they're just looking at followers on social media where that's a different metric. That's brand awareness. That's something else. It's not necessarily the core metric for what a successful business looks like.
Absolutely. And, I constantly am showing people, look at my Facebook page. I have maybe 3,000 followers, and that's small peanuts in comparison to other people. But I still bring in 7 figures a year easily. I have a team of coaches that work under me. And, for me, it's not about how many people are following me. It's about how many people can I impact? How many people can I help in their businesses? And that number is only going to be reflected in your bottom line.
So let's talk about that because I know a lot of people listening in are probably waiting to hear your 7-figure business secrets or what they can do to build a 7-figure business. But maybe let's talk about what do you think are the core fundamentals of any business that every business needs to have in order to one day become a sustainable 7-figure business?
I think the fundamentals are you need to understand your brand, understand what your brand is, understand what your brand isn't, and don't try to make your brand like anyone else. So, and that's the hardest part for me, I would say. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy if you're on someone's mailing list to make your mailers start sounding like their mailers. Or if you follow someone on Facebook to make your posts start sounding like them, because we start to emulate what we think is working. But the reality is that you have to know your brand. You have to know your demographic. I would say the other kind of fundamental is knowing your value proposition, specifically your unique value proposition. What do you do that's different than other people? So great, you're a health coach. How are you a different health coach than any other health coach out there? And so that's really important, is understanding what unique things you bring to the table. I think kind of the last fundamental is systems. You have to have great systems in place. If you don't have great systems in place, you can have the best brand, the best business, the best UVP, and still fail. So, having your payment system, and the way I say it is, there are channels for every phase in your business. Okay. So there are essentially 5 channels. So now I'm going into teaching mode. I apologize.
Yes, get to teaching. I'm taking notes too. So go ahead, sister. I am taking notes.
So there are 5 channels in each business. And a channel is basically, how do people hear about you? How do people know about you? How do you do whatever it is that you do in your business? And so each channel, and each channel isn't necessarily just a channel on its own, but each channel is basically in phases. So they cover some or all of those phases, but essentially you can distinguish between your direct channels and then your indirect channels, as well as, I'm digging deep into the weeds. Sorry. Okay. So basically the 5 channel phases are essentially how people learn about you and how they complete a transaction. So the first phase is awareness. And that's essentially, how are you going to raise awareness about your company's products and services? So once you determine that, once you answer that question, then I need you to write down every system you need in order to make that happen. Okay, I'm going to create Facebook ads. Great. I'm going to need Canva to build the Facebook ad, or maybe hire a VA to do it for me. I'm going to need to make sure that I have the finances to pay for said Facebook ads. I'm going to need to be able to understand how Facebook ads work. So I might have to buy an ebook or buy an e-course on that. Those are all channels that create awareness, right? Mm-hmm. The second phase is evaluation. So how are you going to help your customers evaluate whether or not they want to buy from you? So is that a website? Great. Who are you going to get your website through? Who's hosting it? Who's building it? Who's editing it? How are they going to click through and look at different things? Is it through Shopify? Is it through Etsy? So these are all all channels within this phase. The next phase is the purchase phase. So that's when people are actually buying. How are you going to let your customers purchase specific products and services? So is it through PayPal? Are they clicking on something and it's going through a PayPal button? Is it going through Stripe? Are they having to actually send in and mail in the order? So those are all channels within that phase. The fourth channel phase is delivery. And that's, how are you going to deliver your product or service to the customer? And that's, is it a file? Is it an electronic product? Then I need to store it somewhere. Where is it going to be stored? Is it going to be stored on Amazon? Is it going to be stored on Dropbox? Is it going to be stored on Google Drive? If it's a tangible product, how are you going to get it to them? Is it USPS? Who's taking it there? Are they picking it up? All of those are channels within that phase. And then last but not least is the after sales. And this is the most ignored system channel that I think people just completely ignore totally. And that's, how do you provide post-purchase customer support? So after the customer buys, are you following up with them? If so, how? Are you sending them a survey? Are you using SurveyMonkey? Are you using Typeform? Are you sending them an email or a letter down the road saying thanks for buying? Are you sending a tripwire? So meaning they buy and then it tells them, oh, hey, you may like this as well. All of those are channels, and all of those are systems that you have to have in place for your business in order for it to succeed.
And I think where a lot of people, I think what you said is so important. I think where a lot of people just stop is that whole awareness phase, because they realize, oops, I don't have that. I'm not even going to try. So I love that you mentioned all these systems. And what I hear you also talking about is you have to go deep. You can't just stop at social media ads. You have to understand, as you said, how am I going to learn how to do social media ads? Where am I going to get the money to do the social media ads? Where am I going to, all that different stuff that I think a lot of people just don't go deep enough. And that's where they're really missing out on opportunities to really shine, because they're not understanding that they have to just keep peeling back those layers more and more.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happens, is they stop at the kind of the superficial level, and then they wonder why their business isn't working. And it's because you got to dig deeper than what, a 15-minute live stream from some business coach is telling you need to do. They're giving you high level. They're not giving you a deep dive. You got to go deeper.
So do you think that it's beneficial for people who really don't understand business but want to start their own business to work with someone who understands business. And I say that because I know somebody, or let me rephrase that. I heard of someone who was starting a business and then had the realization that they had no business skills, but they had already launched the business. And I thought to myself, I said, that's not very smart, right? Like, you went through all this,
right?
And you realize at the end that you have no idea what you're doing. Why did you never try to get some help?
So I recommend new entrepreneurs to either do one of two things. I'm a huge believer that brand new entrepreneurs, never run a business before a day in my life, do not need a business coach. You need a mastermind. You need a course, but you don't need a business coach. And the reason I say this is because business coaches are expensive because you're getting their one-on-one time. And a lot of times what they create when they're working with brand new entrepreneurs, and I know I'm going to get lots of emails on this one, but what they create when they're working with brand new entrepreneurs is a crutch where they can't build their business without a coach. They can't grow their business without a coach. They may succeed and have a 6-figure year, but that next year they can't do the same results without having someone else there telling them how to do it. Whereas a mastermind or a course is making you learn how to do it yourself. So it's, teaching a man to fish versus just handing them a fish. And so I don't believe brand new entrepreneurs should get a coach. I believe they should join a mastermind or a virtual incubator program or join a course. But I don't believe that they should actually get coaches until they understand the basics of how their business is operated.
That's such good information. Something that I had always thought about, but I've never been able to articulate it in that sense because so I'll tell you a little bit about me. So at some point I was doing one-on-one consulting work with people in marketing, right? But new entrepreneurs who wanted some marketing strategy help. And where I was then falling into where I was being challenged was I would get to the point where the clients wouldn't want to do it themselves. They would want me to do it. And I thought the whole purpose of consulting with them was teaching them the strategies. But then I realized they were seeing me as the person who would just do it for them. So
you're the wizard.
I had to transition out of doing that kind of work or being more selective with the type of clients that I had because I realized that wasn't the service that I was trying to provide, or maybe I hadn't articulated the service well enough in the onset. But it was just, it was really enlightening to see how some entrepreneurs really don't want to get their hands dirty. And it made me question whether they didn't really understand what it would mean to be an entrepreneur, right?
Right.
Yeah. It was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I find that happens a lot. A lot of my clients that are brand new, they want you to kind of take it over. And I'm like, no, that's why I'm not coaching you. I'm putting you in a mastermind because that helps you build it yourself and learn from someone who's experienced the things that you should avoid. But you're not being put in the position of learning to build this business with a crutch. You're learning how to build it on your own.
And I honestly think when you get your hands dirty, you just learn so much. Like 3 years ago when I started my blog, I went on WordPress. I was Googling everything. And within that course of just trying to build my own website, I learned so many things that I wouldn't have learned if I had automatically sent it to a developer and just said, hey, make this for me. So now when I do work with website developers, I really have a core understanding of what it is that they're doing. I may not understand it at the level at which they understand it, but I can say, I think we need a different plugin here, or, I think that code needs to be changed right here. So it's so important to get your hands dirty in the beginning.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
So, Amber, what do you think? Okay, so let's say somebody has a goal of making 7 figures in 1 year. I think pricing is something that's definitely going to factor into that, and it can definitely change depending upon the product they have or the service that they're selling. Do you have any guiders on what people should be thinking about when they're pricing themselves or pricing their business?
Absolutely. So the number one factor in pricing your business is not how much you want to make. I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make, right? They say, I want to make 7 figures, so now I'm going to price everything really high so that I can make 7 figures. But the number one factor in what you price your products or services on should be your clientele. If you have a demographic of single moms who are at entry-level positions, then your product can't be $10,000 because they can't afford it. Mm-hmm. So you have to keep in mind, who are you selling this to? And I stress often that there are three different types of business models in the world. Well, really four, but three different types of business models. There's a Walmart. So the price it low, sell it high type of thing, price it really low and just sell mass quantities of it. Mm-hmm. There's the Target, which is price it a little higher and sell mass quantities of it. There's the Nordstrom Rack, which is, it could be high, but it's going to seem like it's not that high, and I'm just going to sell a moderate amount of it. Or there's the Bergdorf's model, where I'm going to price it high, and I'm going to sell a select few of them, and that will make the amount that I need to make. So for me personally, for A Square Coach, we have a little bit of Target / Bergdorf's, right? So we kind of did both, where we have the luxury items, we have the $50,000 coaching packages, we have the $20,000 coaching packages, but we also have masterminds that start at like $500. So it's a mixed bag. So you really have to look at your demographic to determine who are you trying to help. And based upon what your goals are with helping them, you have to make sure it's priced within something that they can afford.
And would you recommend changing prices depending upon customer feedback, or do you think you should do the research beforehand so you don't have to do that?
Definitely do the research beforehand, but I would always, anytime someone says, well, my customers are saying that the price is too high, I immediately ask them, are they really your customers, or are they just the people who seem like they're interested? Because there's a difference. Family and friends are not your customers, right? When we start off, we post on Facebook, I've got this new business, and the only people who follow us on Facebook are our family and friends. They are not your customers. And so, I talked to an event planner yesterday who was just starting out, and she wanted to have a luxury event planning. She had the skill set. Her gallery was gorgeous, and she was charging like $200 for a full day event. And I said, are you serious? And she said, well, that's what, my clients can afford. And I said, those aren't your clients. Those people are not your clients. What you are providing is a value that is much higher. Your demographic that you're talking to now is not the people that you need to be talking to. You need to shift gears. You need to pivot. You need to talk to someone else who can afford what it is that you're charging. And if you say, you know what, no, Amber, that really is my demographic, then you do need to lower your price because you didn't properly research your demographic. If you go to pewresearch.org or pewsocialtrends.org, there's tons of fact-based, science-based research done on demographics, and they'll give you everything you need to know. So they'll tell you what Latino women between ages 25 to 35 who work a corporate position are going to make. So they can give you that range and do your actual research. Business is not a game. Business is not, it's not a joke. It's a hustle. You have to be willing to put in the grind and not just say, I got a pretty logo, I have a pretty website. You have to be willing to actually do the work and get your hands dirty, like you said, and research your demographic. And that will help you have a lot smoother ride than if you don't.
That was pewsocialtrends.org, right?
Mm-hmm. PEW.
I will link to that in the show notes for people listening in. I'm looking at it now, and it definitely is. I know I used this when I was in college I was a sociology major, so this was like my best friend too. So definitely use this because, as you said, a lot of people don't want to do the research, but if you can get as specific as possible with your target customer, you'll be able to understand them better, and you won't have those problems as you were saying. But Amber, let me ask you this. We talked a lot about some of the successes you've had, but right now, what do you think is a challenge that you're facing as an entrepreneur, and how are you working through it?
Oh, right now, I think the biggest challenge is oversaturation of the market. Everybody and their mom is a business coach now. And unfortunately, it leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because the real business coaches, people who have actually built businesses and understand what it takes to make them operate and run, people who have worked behind the scenes in the corporate world and sat at the executive table and knows what decisions need to be made. Those people are being overshadowed by the really cutesy people who have massive, brands, in terms of, it's colorful, it's bright, it's poppy. It's like, oh my gosh, here I am. I'm so adorable. And people get kind of swayed by that. But then when they work with them and they get no results, then they come to real business coaches, and it becomes frustrating because it's like, now you have no money because you've spent it all with them. And you want me to play, Glinda the Good Witch and fix it all. And I can't. And so I think right now that's a big issue. And that's something that I think a lot of business coaches are running into, is these business coaches who have no business experience, who have not built businesses before being a business coach. They are Google business coaches. And so a way that we've addressed it is I really am pushing for standards within coaching, the coaching community. Having coaches that are coaching under me, they are all amazing and exceptional in what they do. And then I also spend a lot of time educating people about what to look for in a business coach. I semi-retired from one-on-one business coaching. And so for me, I really wanted to make sure that people knew this is what you need to look for when you're hiring a business coach. This is what you need to ask them, and the red flags to look for. So that's kind of how I'm combating it. But yeah, I think that would be the biggest issue is, coaching is an unregulated industry as of now. I truly believe that within the next 5 years, there will be some regulations placed upon it, just due to the amount of lawsuits that are happening from different clients to various business coaches who aren't getting them any results. And so I do see it becoming regulated at some point. And so because it's so unregulated, people just come in and they think that, oh, I know about this, or, oh, I gave my girlfriend some advice on how to set up her hair salon. And so now I'm a business coach and I'm going to help people with their, help them hit six figures, and they haven't hit six figures themselves. And there are a lot of, you'd really be surprised. I feel like this is a tea session now, but you'd really be surprised the amount of people who are fabulous on the brand, but will call me or text me or email a colleague of mine, someone that I know, and say how their business is failing. And they're the same ones that you would swear that they are having $1 million years. And so I think that it's something that we're constantly trying to work through, trying to combat. It hasn't really impacted our business in terms of that, because we have a lot of repeat clients. We have a lot of clients that they work with us and then they tell their friends. So we do a lot of word of mouth. So we don't really struggle as much with it. But I see it impacting the industry as a whole. And I love this industry. And I think that, I'm fiercely protective of it. And so for me, that's really important, is making sure that there's awareness of, what is a good coach versus someone who just doesn't know what they're doing.
So what keeps you motivated? Although, this is one challenge you're facing right now, and there probably are other things in your business too. What's that thing that day in and day out is your fuel in your fire, or your fire in your, you know what I'm trying to say? What's that thing that that really just keeps you going?
My future children. So, when people say, what's your why? It's honestly, I want to build generational wealth. I don't want to have a wealthy life myself. I want to have generational wealth. And especially in the Black community, you don't see it as much. You see, oh, this person was an NBA player. And then by the time you get to their grandchildren are living like, Joe Schmo. But, one thing I've always noticed, I've always gone to predominantly white schools. And one thing I've always noticed is at these schools, they were always private schools, you would have kids that you'd say, well, how do you live in this big house? And they'd say, well, our family has money. Oh, well, who has money? You know what? I don't know who the first person was that made money. I don't know. And it's like, what? How do you not know? But it's because it goes that far back in years, right? But due to our background as African Americans here in this lovely country, we can't go that far back. But for me, I want to be the start. I want to be the pivotal point that, 100, 200, 300 years from now, my family is still reaping the benefits of what I build today. And so that's my why.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's something that is just inspiring even to me because I'm first generation American, so my parents are from Jamaica. So that was their thinking of why they came to this country, right? And why they put me and my sister through private school. Because like you, I went to private school, I went to Princeton, and you just see all this old money, and it's like, wait, I can't even go back beyond my grandma to know,
right,
where my family comes from. So I think that's something that could really build up our community of color, especially within the United States. And I think something else, and I wanted to ask you about, I don't know if we have time on this, I think just our whole idea of money, how we spend money, how we get money, how we save money is something that within our culture, we're not educated enough about, right? And that may be why a lot of us, when we enter into business, we aren't really able to understand how to scale a business because our whole concept of money is just crazy,
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think that is a huge factor. We aren't taught about money. We aren't taught about saving. My parents, I remember I've had a savings account since I was in the 5th grade, that my parents set up for me. And, money wasn't something we discussed though. It wasn't, I didn't know what money, like in terms of how much money was coming in or going out, or I didn't know anything about money. And so I think a lot of times, our community, we get to this point that we're adults and nowhere in the adulting courses did they teach us about, how to set a budget. And that makes it very difficult when I think other communities, they put a strong emphasis on money and they put a strong emphasis on not just how to make it, but, how to save it. And I think our community, we don't put as much emphasis on the saving part because we tend to live check to check more than any other ethnic group. We tend to focus on the hustle and the grind and, the living for the weekend, which of course then means that we spend that money on the weekend. And so I think definitely there needs to be some sort of change in our communities. Even just little ones should know about budgeting and, what goes out has to be replaced.
Agree 100% with that. But let's get into our lightning round, Amber. So this part of our interview, I'm going to give you a prompt, and I want you to tell me the first word that comes to mind. And this is going to go with our whole dreams and drive metaphor, okay?
Okay.
All right. So the first word is park.
Oh, stop.
Reverse.
Bad.
Neutral.
Worse.
Drive.
Good.
It's always so interesting to hear everyone's responses. Sometimes I get like far left responses, and I get neutral, then I get right responses. So it's all, no worries. So last but not least, if you want to be a dream driver, you have to have the keys to success. So Amber, tell me 3 things that you think every dream driver needs in their toolkit before they hit the road.
The first is believe in yourself more than anyone else believes in you. It's okay to be a little arrogant. If you want to achieve your dreams, you're going to have to be. The second is understand those who and respect those who came before you and who are willing to help you. Everybody needs a little help at some point. And then the third is do what you love. Don't just do what you're good at. Focusing on the things that you love will ensure that you don't work a day in your life, but doing things that you just happen to be good at that you don't love, you'll be miserable.
Thank you so much, Amber. Where can our dream drivers find you online?
Sure. So you can check me out at asquaredcoach.com. You can also check me out on all social media platforms at Amber_Aziza, except for Snapchat. It's without the underscore.
All right. Thank you so much, Amber.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so that's a wrap for episode 45 with Amber Aziza. Thank you so much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed hearing Amber share her dream driving story as well as her personal keys to success. Let me know what you think of today's episode. Feel free to send me a message or comment on social at Dreams and Drive across the board. Or you can send me an email, Raina@dreamsanddrive.com, and I'll make sure to answer you. If you really enjoyed this episode and you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, leave a review. We're also on SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, all those places you can listen to podcasts. You can also find Dreams and Drive. For today's show notes, visit dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 45. We link to the resources that Amber mentions in the podcast episode. I want to say I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining us to episode 45. Like, this has been a journey. The year has almost been over. I still have a lot more that I want to share with you guys. So I'm hoping that the end of the year is equally swell. Keep dreaming, keep driving, and we'll chat again in episode 46.